Red Notice is the latest Netflix film to hit the streaming platform. This one is the latest Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds vehicles. They have decided to team up and make a movie together. This movie is about a special agent named John Hartley, who is an FBI profiler who is hunting down the #1 art thief in the world, Nolan Booth, played by Ryan Reynolds. They catch him and they find this artifact, this egg, part of the 3 Cleopatra egg set that they're after, but then all of a sudden this other thief called the Bishop that wants to be #1 now have framed John Hartley, so now Dwayne Johnson ends up in the same prison as Ryan Reynolds, and now they need to team up to get out of there and clear his name and get the eggs, and they're going on a world-hopping adventure now to fight Gal Gadot. When it comes to this movie and my anticipation for it, I was always kind of reserved on it, because I was like, hey, Ryan Reynolds and Dwayne Johnson, they can make some entertaining movies. They are both charming people, so this could be something that's fun. I definitely like the idea of them using their star power to make these more original big action movies, but then I started to think like, well, this is a Ross and Marshall Thurber movie, who previously, has done some funny comedies like Dodgeball, and I have a soft spot for We're the Millers, but then recently tried to dip into more action seriousness with Skyscraper, which was kind of generic. Like, I remember kind of maybe I gave it a C+ when I saw it in theaters, but ever since then it's just kind of been like a more generic kind of memory of it, So as far as this, I was a little concerned. I definitely liked the fact that it seemed like they were going to lean in more on some comedy. The strength of The Rock is the fact that he's not alone in a movie, because Skyscraper, it's just him trying to get back to his family, and it's just kind of dull and whatever. And usually The Rock is really strongest when he's partnered up with someone like a Jason Statham or a Kevin Hart, or in this instance, Ryan Reynolds. So I was interested, but still a little reserved, just considering everything. This is apparently the biggest budget movie that Netflix has been committed to making and releasing, which is weird because this is the kind of movie that I feel like if it did go to theaters, it would probably do relatively well. And I feel like a lot of the goodwill that has been brought up by Netflix and streaming services, the rise of them, is that there's a lot of movies that if you did release them to theaters, they would probably bomb. They wouldn't find their audience till much later. But putting it on a streaming service right away, it's like, hey, it's right on the homepage. If it's a new release, it's always right there in trending. So it might be able to find its audience much sooner. It's, more accessible to the people because they regularly pay for the streaming service instead of paying like a whole mountain of money just to go to a theater all the time. And I always thought that was really cool of Netflix. Like, hey, because of Netflix, a movie like Bird Box can be like one of the most watched movies of theirs at the time, when if that went to theaters, it would have bombed. But in this case, Red Notice, I feel like it was originally supposed to go to theaters. I do remember that some studio won a bidding war for it. But then it was kind of like after the release of Skyscraper, and that didn't do all that well. It seemed like maybe they got a little cold feet and then Netflix picked it up, which it's very weird because I feel like this is like the direct opposite of Skyscraper, just in the sense of it's not just Dwayne Johnson, climbing a building and that's it. It's, Dwayne Johnson partnered up with Ryan Reynolds and Gal Gadot is in it. It looks like a bigger movie. So it seemed like a movie that if you did release it in theaters, it might not be like a gangbuster blockbuster or anything, but it would probably do relatively well. It might also do relatively well if you shrunk that $200 million budget, because if you look at it, each actor apparently got a $20 million paycheck for this. So 2040, that's $60 million in total. If you can shrink that a bit, I don't think all 3 of these people need $20 million. You could find actors who are cheaper but still kind of well-known enough, and you would be able to shrink the budget at least a little bit, and maybe you would have a better chance of making your money back. I don't know. The point is, it's a strategically made movie to attract more Netflix subscribers, as opposed to Netflix just wanted to give this movie an audience. Which isn't bad. It's not bad that Netflix is making some decisions like this, because sometimes you can still get really good stuff. But I just thought it was worthy of bringing up because overall I found this movie to be very safe. It's a very enjoyable in the moment kind of action movie that definitely does ride on the fact that Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds can share a scene together, and their chemistry definitely does make it somewhat enjoyable throughout, but I can't say that this was an experience that was particularly memorable or one that I want to see more of. Like I said earlier, this is more of a Ross and Marshall Thurber action comedy as opposed to just action, which was Skyscraper. So, you know, being able to lean on what he's kind of strong at while also, you know, trying to do more action, I think that works very well. There's actually a lot of fun action sequences in this. There's like, the camera is moving around like very wildly, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on. It's honestly the way they, you know, hop to place and, you know, orchestrate scenes around some of these places they go. I think they did an overall solid job at doing that. I was definitely entertained whenever action was kicking in. And it definitely helps that you have Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds working off together. Dwayne Johnson being the straight man and then Ryan Reynolds being the wacky, you know, comedic one. Or to put it in simpler terms, Dwayne Johnson is playing Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds is playing Ryan Reynolds. But I actually do want to like give a special shout out to Nolan Booth, Ryan Reynolds' character in this movie, because yes, he's very much the Van Wilder Deadpool type. He's always trying to make people laugh. He's always got a joke ready to go. It's a lot of references to things. But then there's a couple moments where you recognize, you know, this is actually a character. He kind of has this moment to let the audience in on, hey, just because I have this Van Wilder front, you know, there's actually, it's a cover for what's actually going on with me, which is I have some past kind of trauma. You know, I have some past history with my dad, and this treasure hunt actually kind of means something a little personal to me. And I thought, man, it's actually very good. Nolan Booth is actually the only character in this movie with a backstory, interestingly enough. And it kind of won me over on this character and kind of seeing them throughout the rest of the movie. The problem is that this kind of exposition dump of a backstory explanation comes very early on. It's in the first act, and while he's explaining it, all of a sudden, once it reaches its emotional conclusion, Dwayne Johnson does a comedically timed snore and then goes, "Ha ha ha, I got you. Oh, I'm just kidding. That sucks, man." And then it cuts to the next scene. And I was like, oh, we're doing this. Essentially, what I'm getting at is that this movie does not want to embrace any kind of emotional beats, sentimentality. You know, there's even a point near the end of the movie in the third act that kind of depends on your investment with the characters. A character has to, you know, he has to make a decision whether to keep going with this treasure or to go back and save this person, you know, because they might be in trouble. And it doesn't work because not only do they undercut that with a joke, but throughout the entire movie, it's hard for me to really pinpoint where exactly these two have been getting along in such a way. It just feels like throughout the entire movie, they're just repeating the same thing over and over, like within each scene. We're totally capable people who are gonna work together, but oh, Ryan Reynolds always telling those jokes, and I'm Dwayne Johnson, and I'm the serious one. Hey, if you don't stop making jokes, I'm gonna kick your ass. That's his idea of a joke. Which is hilarious to me. Like Dwayne Johnson's idea of improv, he thinks he's like this hilarious comedic guy, is looking at the actual funny one and going, if you don't stop talking, I'm gonna kick the shit out of you. And that's a joke. And they just kind of keep doing that over and over again. Any attempts to maybe further develop the characters fall utterly short, and you don't really see those points where the characters connect. If you gave this project to someone like Shane Black, who, you know, did one of the best buddy cop movies out there, The Nice Guys, you know, you would actually be able to use this Nolan Booth character in a way that was interesting, and you would also have something interesting for Dwayne Johnson as well. You know, you'd actually really bond with these characters. They'd have like absolutely perfection of chemistry instead of just doing the exact same thing over and over again. It would be just this constant build of them actually finding out how to work together and how they, you know, how these people operate. And instead, I just never found myself fully convinced with the characters, especially since there's a twist that I found completely obvious that I've just decided, you know, I want to say, without spoiling anything, here's my explanation for it, but it's literally impossible to explain without spoiling. So spoiler warning, if you want to just see my grade, you can go ahead and jump to that near the end. But I'm going to talk about this big twist that the entire movie is probably made around. Ross and Marshall Thurber was probably really inspired by, I want to do this twist in a movie, so this is the movie that he came up with to do that. So I'm going to start talking about spoilers, so I'll give you one last chance to click off. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so in the beginning of the movie, when Dwayne Johnson shows up, he just shows up at the scene. There's no introduction to him as far as like, this is what he does in his personal life, this is his life at the FBI, you know, or anything like that. You don't really get to know this character at all. Just he shows up at the beginning action scene which is, you know, him and Nolan Booth meeting. And someone is saying like, hey, this is an FBI profiler. He's been hunting this guy for a while. He's here to assist. And another guy looks at Dwayne Johnson and is like, you don't look like an FBI profiler. And he's like, I get that all the time. And then they just proceed with the action scene. And I just started to think like, you know what? Yeah, it is very weird that an FBI profiler is The Rock. You know, it is very funny, that idea. It's kind of poor casting in a way, especially because you could probably do something really funny with this idea that an FBI profiler is like kind of trying to overstep their boundaries as far as what their job limit is. Like, there's actually a really funny scene where Dwayne Johnson is getting into a car chase and he thinks he's about to go and then he gets hit immediately. Like, that was really funny, actually. But then it actually started to kind of click with me. I was like, hold on. This guy basically has no character other than just his job title, and they've casted him as Dwayne Johnson, which doesn't seem right for an FBI profiler fit, but it's Dwayne Johnson. And in this opening action scene, there's a weird line of dialogue he says, where it all of a sudden made me think like, oh, I think I know what the twist is. Because this is a line they're going to cut back to later to show the true intentions of, because Dwayne Johnson is actually the bad guy. So the entire time I was waiting for that reveal, and all the while there's these not so subtle hints dropped in dialogue where I'm like, hey, this is not as sneaky as you think it is. And all of a sudden, the twist happens, and I was right. Dwayne Johnson was working with Gal Gadot, who is fun in this movie. Gal Gadot has a very simple role, but one that works. You know, you don't really need a lot of, like, character development, at least with her role in this. So she was fun in this. She was absolutely fine. But the Dwayne Johnson twist was one that I absolutely predicted from the start. So that really undercut a lot of what this movie was trying to go for me. Because as far as like how I view things that are like, say, predictable, you know, I try to look at it as, well, does it still work in context with the movie? Does the movie still work even if someone like me who sees a lot of movies is still able to predict this? I make a wild guess and I'm right. And I just found that twist didn't necessarily work for me, because the entire time I don't know anything about this character. You're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that's the entirety of this movie for me, is I know what's going to happen. This chemistry is all right, but you're barely doing anything with it because probably you're leading up to this. And it doesn't help also that the red herring villain played by Chris Diamantopoulos is no good at all. It's weird because I just saw him, I've seen him in a couple of good things. Like, he had a small role in Invincible, but then he also had a really funny role in the Netflix series Inside Job, where he voices a robot who's like, he's the kind of the villain in the first episode. He's designed to take over the president. It goes wrong, but they capture him, but they're still trying to study him. And his whole thing is like, I'm gonna break out of here eventually, but maybe I'll do that after I'm done watching Friends. You know, he's really funny. He's got like a great voice. He's a great voice actor. And he's been in a lot of cool stuff. But in this movie, he's just doing an old man voice, which I don't know why they did that, and it's just like, he shows up for one set piece, and then he's there for the next one right after, but then he's gone from the movie, and it's like, this villain isn't a good holdover either, you know, as far as like trying to convince you that there is someone else more dangerous right now. And also, the other antagonist of this movie is a lady from Interpol, the one who's partnered up with Dwayne Johnson at the beginning, and because you know very little about like her, when she comes in and starts framing Dwayne Johnson, even though ultimately she's right to do that because he is the bad guy, but you as an audience member aren't supposed to know that yet, so she's just coming in with like, very obviously, you are the bad guy here because this is a fake, and we called one person, not anyone from the FBI, we haven't called anyone from your family or anything, but we called this one person who says, you don't exist in the FBI, so I'm going to treat you harshly because you hurt my feelings, And it's like, hey, you guys have a friendship? Where was that? You know, like, it seems like you guys just met. Why are you acting like, oh, you really hurt my feelings? I mean, that could be an interesting thing, you know, have this antagonist who has like a personal vendetta against Dwayne Johnson because they've been partners or they've known each other for a long time. But that character is just very weak, and whenever she pops up in the movie, I'm like, ugh, do we really need law enforcement in this thief con movie? We maybe don't need that. We don't need a face, which is what her character ultimately is just to put a face on the Interpol people. But it was just, I just couldn't care about it, you know? I'm not gonna act like every single joke in this movie works. There's definitely some lines where Ryan Reynolds, it's very obvious he's thinking of stuff very quickly. Not everything is gonna stick, but I will say the humor and him are what mostly kind of got me somewhat entertained by this movie. And you just, Dwayne Johnson, he's a solid performer. He can do all right. And then you have Gal Gadot, who is fun. But I just can't say that the story itself, despite the fact that I should love this movie, I love the idea of just going on a treasure hunt, hopping from place to place, and utilizing these interesting set pieces because there is fun action here. But I just can't say that I found myself particularly invested in the story. And I didn't care for any of the twists. I didn't see these characters actually getting along. I didn't actually grow a connection with these characters like they wanted me to, but they're also at the same time trying to set up a franchise. Like, hey, these people can actually team up again, see you in the next movie. And it's like, number one, will that even work because of Dwayne Johnson's busy schedule? And will that work because you're probably gonna have the same creative team working on it, and this one was just whatever. Like, most of it, as far as just like filmmaking for an action movie goes, it's pretty solid, but then there's a party sequence that they do where throughout it I was constantly questioning, like, wait, they didn't think about this, how they were going to handle this. Wait, is this actually going to work for this technology? Is that something that actually matters? Hey, this character was essentially just shoved out of the room and then they're not there throughout the rest of the scene. What happened here? There's some details where it felt like we just got to keep the movie going. We have this idea for a party scene and we've clumsily put together something. If that was their vibe for the rest of the movie, if that was their vibe throughout the whole thing, it was only really apparent during this party scene, which is bad enough. So overall, a lot of people might, watch this movie and love it, and just because it has people that they love in it doing stuff that seems fun and entertaining. Allegedly, it is the most watched Netflix movie on opening day, which is something that we can't say because we see actual numbers. It's just, hey, Netflix said it, so it must be true, so whatever. So overall, there might be people that really do like this movie, and I don't want to take that enjoyment away from them. It's just, like, for me personally, I can't really recommend it just off of the basis of I've seen a lot better Netflix movies, especially, like, bigger budget Netflix movies out there, And as far as, like, a Dwayne Johnson or a Ryan Reynolds movie goes, this is definitely one of their weaker ones, and it's weird that in a way, they're playing it so safe. Like, Ryan Reynolds, I do like to give Ryan Reynolds credit because even though the Deadpool-esque humor is something that he utilizes a lot, there are times where he's at least, he can still act and show his range. He's had a long career before Deadpool where he's, done different stuff. Like, a lot of people say Buried is one of his best roles. I really like him in a movie called The Voices. Very interesting movie, very fascinating performance from him. He can do really great stuff. And then even after Deadpool, he still was able to do a movie called Life, which is not a Deadpool-esque performance from him. The Hitman's Bodyguard, at least the first one, kind of relies on him being more of the straight man. Even if it is Ryan Reynolds-ified, it is mostly a straight man performance to a, amazing Samuel L. Jackson, balls to the wall performance. Even in Free Guy, where, a lot of, like, I would say some of the weaker elements of that movie is when he tries to do a joke and then my eyes go wide and I just came up with an ad-lib. Ultimately, the motivation of the character will take over and it's like, okay, I'm won over at least. And in this, it just reminds me of The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, where it's just, I'm gonna phone it in, which is basically me just doing Deadpool, but I'm not wearing the costume, So it reminded me a lot of that. And then as far as Dwayne Johnson goes, a lot of his more recent movies, especially the ones he's producing, where, each production is designed around him being the star, it either ranges from decent, enjoyable, decent movie to just okay, like, literally these past couple years, I think the highest grade I've given to one of his movies that is, like, produced by him is, like, the first Jumanji movie, which is, like, a B. Everything else is, like, B- to C+ range, which is just, whatever, I would really like one of these productions to actually step up and be the best, because it seems like he's doing everything all at once. It's not hard to imagine why some of these very easily fixable mistakes keep being put in some of these movies, but here we are. Dwayne Johnson is trying to do everything. He's trying to please everybody. He's still, for some reason, trying to say, I'm gonna run for president. Here's a fucking sitcom about how I'm future rock and I'm running for president and we're doing flashbacks to my youth, which is gonna teach everyone some valuable lessons because I'm the rock and I'm amazing. And it's like, dude, I don't know how much more of this I can take, especially now that you're also coming in and taking over Netflix. You're doing a streaming thing for Amazon. can we chill out, please? Can we, like, focus more on projects that are really great instead of just, well, we gotta make the next action vehicle for Dwayne, we gotta make the next comedic action movie for Ryan Reynolds, so let's just, you know, throw some shit together. Whatever. It definitely is interesting how the things that stand out in this Red Notice movie are Gal Gadot, who is not these two, but also whenever they do just sit back and let Nolan Booth talk about his past before Dwayne Johnson undercuts with a joke, or, you know, they let the humor take over again. I wish that that's what they focused on, but whatever. It's Red Notice. You're gonna watch it. It's on Netflix. Whatever. I'm gonna give this movie a C+. It's enjoyable enough. I don't even hate this movie. I know I might be talking a lot about, oh, this, and this, but I don't hate this movie. It was enjoyable enough, but I just wish it was better because all the potential and the money is there to do that, and it seems like they used all this money to make the same thing that they usually would. Something safe, not too offensive or anything like that. And it just ultimately creates something that's so, whatever, you know. I wish they would take some risks with the storytelling, with actually letting these characters, you know, grow with each other and open up, you know, and be somewhat sentimental, whatever. Yeah, but Dwayne Johnson wants to ad-lib about how I'm a bigger man than you and I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. Whatever. But if you've seen Red Notice, leave in the comments below what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.